All right, hi guys. So this week we are talking about the difference between warm and cool colors, and we are focusing specifically on cool colors for our project this week, and I'll describe why in just a minute. So this week we are going to be drawing snowflakes and using cool colors to decorate those snowflakes. So just a quick review from our slides. Our cool colors are all of our colors that are on one side of the color wheel, and our main ones are blue, purple, and green, and then all of the colors that fall in between those colors on our color wheel, so blue, green, blue, violet, things like that. So these colors give us kind of like a cool, cold feeling, which goes really well with our snowflake art this week. So I want to first talk about a couple of alternate supplies that you could use if you don't have some of the things that I'm going to be using today. So of course, if all you have is crayons or if all you have is markers, you could just take out all of the cool colored ones that you can find. So any greens, any blues, any purples, and simply draw a snowflake with these. It's really fun to look online at some different snowflake shapes with your grown-ups' permission because there are a bunch of really unique ones. It's so interesting how those ice crystals form. So you might get some inspiration with a grown-up's permission to look at some different snowflake shapes and then just make a drawing using your cool colors. But I have a couple of projects today. If you happen to have crayon and marker or crayon and paint at home. And for this project, I'm specifically going to be using watercolor paint for the technique that I'm going to be doing. But if you have something like tempera or acrylic paint at home, you could use those as well. Just go ahead and make a painting. So I know it's very hard to see on here, but you can see when I tilt it, I have taken a white crayon and I have drawn 3 snowflakes on my paper. Now these are really hard to see what you're drawing when you're using a white crayon on white paper, obviously. So another thing that you could do is draw it in pencil first. Here I did one really large snowflake. And then I went ahead and traced over the top of that with my crayon. You can kind of see the shine from the crayon there. The crayon is really essential for this version of this project because crayon is waxy. It has a lot of wax in it. Wax resists, it doesn't like water. So those two things aren't friends. So if you put something that is wax-based, like a crayon down first, and then use something water-based on top of it, that crayon kind of pushes away that colored water. And so you can still see your great, beautiful lines. So for this first one, I'm going to be using watercolor. Watercolor is water-based, so that's why we're using that paint this week. And I have liquid watercolor in my classroom, but you might have just like a watercolor pan at home, and that will be perfect as well. So I have 2 cups of watercolor colors here, and I've just mixed a little bit of my liquid watercolor with a little bit of water. So I have a purple and I have a blue. Those are both cool colors. And I'm going to get a nice big paintbrush, and you'll see when I go over the top of this that it's kind of like magic ink. My snowflakes will start to appear as I paint on top of it. So I'm going to take my blue first. You can see it's kind of pushing away that watercolor as I go on top of it. And I think I'm going to be kind of abstract with my background. Now you could paint a background like a snowy winter scene if you wanted to, but I think today I'm just going to focus on the colors that I'm using. So I'm going to put a little bit of blue down. I'm going to put a little bit of purple, and I'm going to let those colors kind of mix together on my paper. And then we're going to throw something kind of fun on top of it. So my watercolor colors are a little bit light today. They turned out a little bit pastel, but that's okay. It kind of matches my sweater today. And I'm just painting with the purple and blue. Now you could also include green, you could include blue-green, any color that's cool. What we don't want to use this week, our goal is not to use warm colors like reds, yellows, oranges, would not be for this project this week. So I'm just kind of blending my colors together. You don't want to, when you're using watercolor, get your paper too wet because then it'll start to maybe rip in the middle. So you can see right here, it's kind of puddling, it's very wet. So I'm going to stop right there, maybe add a little bit more blue into this middle area, because if you want to go a step further, if you have watercolors at home, it is also really fun to grab some table salt, some sea salt from your house, and then just sprinkle it on top of your watercolor. Now, your watercolor does have to be pretty wet for this to work. So if you see areas of your paper that are starting to dry a little bit, you might want to go back over with the watercolor so that you're sure it's really, really wet. And then you're going to sprinkle this sea salt all around your paper, and you can see it's already starting to attract and draw in some of that watercolor that we put down before. And what you want to do is you don't want to touch it. After you sprinkle it down, you want to let your painting completely dry with the salt on top. The salt is going to absorb some of your watercolor, and then when it's all the way dry, you can go ahead and brush off some of that salt, and it's going to look like you have little snowflakes floating around your paper. So that's really fun. I'm going to put this one aside. It's really wet, so I'm being careful, and I really should have pushed up my sleeves for this. For my second one, if you don't happen to have watercolor at home, but you have crayon and markers, washable markers, don't use Sharpies, washable markers are also water-based, so it does kind of the same thing as our watercolor. When I go over my crayon, you can see there it's kind of pushing some of that color away. Now, it doesn't do as good a job as our watercolor does, but you can still see all of your lines kind of poking through there. And so if you want to kind of color an abstract pattern on your paper with washable markers on top of your crayon, it kind of does the same thing, and that could potentially look really cool. So if I want to, I can kind of create like a tie-dye effect, or you could draw something in the background. Again, you could create a pattern of some kind. I think I want mine to kind of look like, and this marker's drying out a little bit, I think I want mine to kind of look like a tie-dye all the way around. So I'm kind of scrabble coloring, but then I'm just switching colors every time I go around the outside. And so I have these really cool like bands of color. If you wanted to take this one step further, and your grown-up is okay with you making a little bit of a mess, once I color with my washable markers, if you have a spray bottle at home, which I do right here, you can go in and spray. You can go in and spray some water on that washable marker, and it kind of turns it into watercolor. So if you have washable markers at home, and maybe you even have a brush, you can kind of spray some water on top of this and make your own watercolor paint. So that's kind of fun. Don't get it too wet. My sprayer was a little bit broken, and so it pushed out a lot of water. But hopefully you will get a nice fine spray with something that you use, and it will just kind of create like a tie-dye effect with whatever you draw on top. Again, you have to use washable markers for this to work well. It does not work with a permanent marker. So be sure you are using something washable if you are doing the marker technique. But you can see I kind of made my own watercolor just from spraying that little area of marker that I did. So if you draw a design and then spray it with water, it's going to keep a little bit of that design. Like if I had drawn like a winter scene behind, or like a pattern of snowmen or something like that, it would have kept a little bit of that and then just pushed the color around. So we hope you guys have a lot of fun making snowflake art this week with cool colors. Of course, if you don't want to make a snowflake, you can choose anything that you want to make this week. But be sure you are using those great cool colors, green, blue, purple, and all the shades in between to create your art. We can't wait to see your cool colored art this week. Bye.